Good afternoon. Hope you've all had a really good dinner and that you're ready for more SQL bits. This is our top 5 disasters of SQL DBAs. We've put the QR code on the screen to start off with. If you've got lots of good things to say about us, that QR code works. If you've got lots of bad things to say about our talk,
come and see me, I'll give you a new QR code.
Yes, it doesn't work. So I think we've got everyone in here. So, yeah, my name is David Postlethwaite. I work for a financial services company in Denmark called Banking Circle. I've been working as a DBA, Oracle and SQL for well over 15 years, longer than I care to remember. As well as working as a DBA now, I'm also a Azure administrator, DevOps admin, BI admin, anything my company wants to throw at me. Yeah, so that is me in a nutshell.
And I am Gethyns. Welcome everybody. I've been working with SQL Server for about 20 years or so. I've had a lot of different jobs in that time. More recently, over the last sort of 14 years, I've been running my own business, and we do things like upgrades and architecture design and high availability performance tuning and some training. If you want to contact us about any of the stuff that you that we talk about today, all right, and there might be some guilty parties in here looking around as well, right? We've probably had a few of the same disasters that we've had over the years. Just reach out and get in touch, and if you want to keep in contact, please do. My LinkedIn profile is on there. Oh, and I was awarded the MVP. I was very delighted about that at the beginning of February, which was a bit of a shock. So I put that on there as well. I've updated my bio slide. All right, get us going then, David.
Okay, just a reminder, tonight we've got the quiz night. Tomorrow is the great party night. There's the QR code again if you want to leave us any positive feedback. And let's get going. So let me just switch back into duplicate mode. So we can now minimize everything. And Management Studio. So let's get into Management Studio. Let's get going. Okay, that's not quite what I was expecting to see.
What's about David? You spelt your name wrong?
Well,
it's quite a long name.
I know it's a long name, 13 characters. Yes, I have been able to spell my name for a long time, and it's not letting me into the database. What have you been up to?
Well, I did. I cleared out all the sort of Windows AD groups that you raised a ticket for me to do.
Including the one called Database Admins?
It just said remove all groups, so I removed all groups.
Brilliant. So how am I going to log into my SQL Server?
Well, I guess you could use the SA account.
That's the SA account that I rename, disable, and set to a random 64-character password and don't store anywhere.
Oh, looks like you've got a bit of a problem then, David. What
yes.
are you going to do?
Okay, so I've managed to lock myself out of my SQL Server. We have no admin accounts. How do we get around this? So let me go onto the virtual machine. And we have an option in SQL Server that we can start it in single user mode. If you put the parameter in -f, it will start it in single user mode. The disadvantage of -f is that anything can connect as that one single user, so probably your agent will connect to one other process. What we can use is the -m option and specify the program that we want to use to connect. So in this case, I'm going to use SQL command. So if I come over to SQL Server Configuration Manager, go to Properties, Startup Parameters. These are the 3 startup parameters that you always see for SQL Server. I'm going to add in -m SQL command. Click OK. Yes, I know. Restart SQL. And that means only one thing can connect using SQL command. And that's SQL started again. So if I get up my command window, and you can see we've been practicing this, run SQL command. I've now got a login to my SQL database. I don't need to put a password in because I am logged in as a Windows admin on the server. You don't need to know a password or even a login name for that matter. And now I can use some nifty code, which in Blue Peter fashion is already recorded. And I can run that, and I've recreated my database admins group, given it sysadmin. Come back over to SQL Server Management or Configuration Manager, come back up to startup parameters, remove SQL command, restart SQL Server.
Here's where the demo breaks, and we have to work out how we're going to do the rest of the session.
Yeah. So now I can connect using my AD account, and I'm back in again. So the most important point, this does look like a bit of a security issue because it means anyone can start SQL in single user mode and connect without having to know a login name or a password as an admin. So make sure you trust your Windows administrators, or just don't tell them about this. Right, let's have a look at our databases. We've got one, Geth. Recovery pending.
Well, can you recover it, David, and bring it back
Let's have
online?
a look. I need to open a file with the commands. So let's see if I can bring my database. Hang on, let's just let it log in. Jum-ba-dum-ba-dum-ba-dum-ba-dum. That's it. So let me see if I can bring my database online. And it's telling me the transaction log file is incorrect or is missing, and it can't rebuild the log file because there were transactions open at the time. If we have a look, I've only got a database file and no log file. I've got a corrupt database and I can't bring it online because I haven't got the transaction log file that goes with it.
So this is actually this is something that's happened to me and David. So in my role as a contractor, I was doing some work for the same firm David works to.
Not the current company,
a
different
company,
one.
but a different company. And I was travelling from Wales to the south coast, and it's taken me 2 hours. I got there one Wednesday morning. David been on his bike coming in from Swanage, and the DBA desks where the DBAs congregated, it was right behind the storage guys. And one of the storage guys said, "Oh, we've lost a disk on filer X." And I said, "Oh, don't worry, NetApp's RAID 6. You can lose 2 disks and still keep going. You'll be fine." Now, all these disks had been made from the same batch and were in the same filer, so they were all going to break at the same time. So 5 minutes later, the second disk went, and then the beads of sweat started to appear on the storage guy's face. It's like, "Oh, we've lost 2 disks here. What are we going to do?" This filer's supporting pretty much all the business. And he said, "Well, we still got one more, and these replacement disks will be here soon." And then 15 minutes later, the third disk went, the filer went. We lost quite a lot of databases to that outage. Now, we had, for most of our databases, the right backup strategy in place, and we were able to recover. But there was one particular one that housed the vCenter database that was backed up on a nightly basis for business reasons. And I'll let David tell the rest of that story.
Yeah, so quite a number of our databases, including this one, the business said, "We only need to go back to last night's backup, so don't run it in full recovery mode, don't take transaction log backups." The trouble is, it crashed. They didn't want to go back to last night's backup because it was too long ago. So we couldn't run the backup. How do we recover the database when we've got no transaction log file because the volumes disappeared, and there were transactions open, so the database is sort of in a bit of a mess. So we worked out a way to do it in the end. So let me just take the database offline and detach it.
Yeah, so just to be clear, we'd lost the log file, we still had the data file, and we couldn't restore from the backup because we'd lose too much data.
Yeah. Now, in researching this, I actually found there is an undocumented feature called attach force rebuild log. So you can just say attach force rebuild log, and it will then recover the log file. But when we did this 10 or so years ago, we didn't know this command, or it didn't exist. And it's undocumented, so that's cheating anyway. So we're not going to use that. What I'm going to do is create a new database with the same name as the corrupt one, but with a different data file. So it's called DB3, but the log file that we want. So let me create the database. Let me take it offline, because once you take it offline, you can start changing data files and log files. So what I'm going to do now is alter the database to use my corrupt data file. And it'll let you do that because it's offline. SQL doesn't care. What we can do now is put it into emergency mode, single user mode, do a check DB, bring it back online, and SQL goes, "Oh, I've got a data file and a log file, but they don't quite match. Let me sort the mess out." You get a few error messages as it sorts itself out, but the database is now back online. What you need to do then is work out what you've lost. because obviously there were transactions in flight when the database went down. In my case, I was deleting everything with an ID less than 5,000 from a table. I had a begin transaction and then just crashed the SQL. And in this case, I've lost all the rows because they've been deleted from the database, but the transaction log hadn't been recovered. So that's how you can recover a database if you've lost the transaction log and it doesn't want to rebuild it because there were transactions in flight. So that got us out of that
pickle.
Deep hole.
That was about
it?
2 o'clock in the morning we came up with this as well. So
Yeah.
it's probably not the most, the ideal time to be coming up with these solutions. But yeah, that was what we got
Right,
there.
so let's go back to the PowerPoint. If we can get the PowerPoint back up and Shift F5. Hopefully we'll get to the next screen. So this was another problem we hit.
This is the royal we in this case. I think I was probably part of the problem here.
Yes.
I'll let David explain.
So we have, like you, we have SQL agent jobs doing backups of all our databases on each server. The problem we had a contractor who set up these jobs, left himself as the owner of the agent job. He then moved on to into another company. His account got disabled and then deleted. If the AD account that owns an agent job no longer exists, the agent job will not run. It will just fail.
Now in my defense, I'd set up alerts for failures.
But there was a problem with emails at the time, so we weren't getting emails from the SQL box to say that the job was failing. So we went without backups for a couple of weeks without realizing it until we sorted it out, and then we sorted it out, and
Fortunately, I was on a time and materials contract.
he had gone by then. So what I learned from this is don't rely on your agent job to tell you that something is failing. What I did was I had a centralized SQL server. Every morning that will go off and fire, will go and read the MSDB tables that have all the logs in them for backups, pull them back down and actually look and see what SQL thinks it's backed up. Work out whether each server, each database has had the backup in the time allowed, whether it's a full backup, transaction log backup, and then that server emails me, or the DBAs, to say, this server has had these backups, everything is correct, or there's a failure. Because sometimes your backup job will run and say it's been successful when it hasn't. So this is a belt and braces way of ensuring that you know you have your backups, not just relying on the agent job, but actually having something else which goes off and checks. If I did it now, I'd probably use DB tools and DBA checks, part of the PowerShell suite, which I'm sure you're aware of. Something else which is worth doing, a backup is only ever as good as a restore. So I now have a job every Sunday. My centralized SQL server now goes and gets all the backups and does a restore of every single database, proves that the database backups are actually correct, and then detaches them and deletes them off the central server. That again is using DBA tools, and a very useful thing from Stuart Moore on PowerShell, which is definitely worth doing. I've written a blog on it as well, because we got it working not just from SQL databases, also from Azure SQL VMs, where you're backing up to a storage account as well. So that was a very useful article, and you should be using that. Have a look at our blog, have a look at Stuart's article, and that will certainly help you to make sure you have your backups. Because if you don't have any backups and something goes wrong, I can assure you your boss will not like you.
Yeah, so gethyns.com/blogs is the blog that was posted today. We'll give you all the details on the backup checks.
Right,
okay.
Over to you.
So over to me. Has anyone ever run an update or delete without a where clause? Put your hand up. Yeah, a few people. Anyone done it on like a Friday afternoon before a long bank holiday weekend? Yeah. Anybody have an availability group set up and the developer who actually run the update said, can you not just go to the readable secondary? I'm like, well, I can, but that's now going to say exactly the same thing. So that's the disaster that I've encountered many times over the years. It's very much a pain. The update nowhere clause will cause your update to affect all the rows in the table, same with a delete. Now, there's a difficult fix for that. I have to recover the database and update the table with, restore a copy of the database and then update the table from the copy. Thank you, James. And we were able to fix it. So the table in question, it wasn't a heavily changed in table, thankfully. And we were able to recover from that copy and just copy it back in. So we didn't have to restore over the top of our production system, and we managed to avoid some downtime. But I guess trying to avoid this situation, you want to have a proper change control in place. Run your update and your select. Test the where clause in a select first. Make sure you are updating the rows that you want to change. Wrap your change in a transaction, so you can roll it back if you happen to forget your where clause. Yes, it might have it locks for a bit longer while the update is running. It might block a few people, but you got the option of rolling back without it impacting everything. Make sure you get the right security model in place. So don't allow your developers to do updates in production on a Friday afternoon in particular. All right, go through your change process and get your DBAs or whoever is responsible for looking after the production system to do these changes. And anything you want to add on that, David?
Yeah, don't let your devs know you have update permissions on your production server. Keep it completely separate. Have 4 eyes looking at any data fixes you're doing on production. Yeah, get the devs to write it, DBAs to check it, DBAs to run it. Otherwise, you're gonna have this situation.
Cool. And then the fifth one is quite relevant given the announcements today. Has anyone ever had a data center flood? Oh, I'm not on my own. I'm normally the only one. Oh, lots of people. Fantastic. That's awesome. So I was working for an organisation in South Wales. They had 2 data centres. It didn't cause us too much disruption, but one was in the basement, built quite near a drain, as it turns out. By accident, we discovered this when it blocked and flooded. So we had to power down the data center, fail over everything to the second data center and bring it back. I could tell you lots of stories about this data center. Somebody sat on the fire extinguisher that set off all the foam, so that closed it down one time. What else have we had going on? So lots of these disasters happen, right? They do happen. They can cause you no end of pain. So you are going to want to consider your disaster recovery plan. And given the announcements this morning with the managed instance and having your DR site nicely up in the Azure cloud, you can actually spin this up and run your databases in a different site quite quickly and quite easily. David, you got anything you want to add?
Yeah, just one thing. One thing that we're thinking of in our company is rather than just testing DR and then failing it back, why not run DR and leave it in your DR center? There shouldn't be any difference in the power or the compute or the internet connection. Leave it there for 6 months, then fail it back again as your fail back test, and just use both data centers instead of just, as we do, fail over, fail it back all on the same day. That's one thing that we are considering as a possible way of proving that our DR center, West Europe, is actually doing what it says it should do. And that is our lot. Well, our time is up, more or less. I think we have about a minute spare. 2 minutes. Well, we've done pretty well. That's not bad, is it?
I'm still sweating quite heavily, though, so hopefully it'll give me time to cool down.
So again, there is the QR code for any positive feedback. Negative feedback, come and talk to us. Anyone got any questions while we have a minute and a half?
Good.
Good, that's always good. Anyway, if you want to chat, come and talk to us afterwards. We'll be around.
And we'll see you at the quiz tonight, maybe.
We'll see you at the quiz tonight. Hopefully you've all got your fancy dress ready for Friday night. We will be dressing up, but we're not going to tell you what.
It does involve a suit, though.
It does involve a suit.
It's the only clothes I bought with me, so...
So thank you very much for coming. Enjoy the rest of the week.